Hey there, folks. Welcome to Trek Tonight. For those of you who didn't catch the little promo I put out earlier this evening, we are going to be presenting to you a encore presentation and an encore presentation of an episode of ours from uh, our first season with Strange New Worlds. This is episode 8 for us, episode 2 for Strange New Worlds, I believe. No, episode 5. I don't remember. But it's Spock Amok, which was a great episode. Lots of fun. In the episode we're presenting tonight, we had our special guest, Joe Townsel, in the house. Joe's always a great guest. And we saved him for Spock Amok because I felt he'd have a lot to say about such a great callback to a TOS era episode. Before we get started, though, I wanted to share something with you. I found this in my library. I think I got this at Barnes and Noble, but it's a bound edition of the James Blish novelizations of all the Star Trek episodes. Maybe not all. They might have left a couple out. But it's really fun. It's a neat book. Nice that it's bound, nice and shiny with the gold on it. Picture of the Enterprise on the back. They were saying here that these stories were published between 67 and 75 by Bantam Books, which I didn't know, but it's a neat book. If you happen to see one laying around and you want to read some of your favorite episodes, it's cool. It's a great book. One of the reasons we're doing an episode as an encore presentation tonight is because I picked up a cold, the first cold of the season, of the school year, that my kids brought home with them. You've seen my kids periodically pop up on the screen, especially towards the end of our episodes. And yes, as those of you who are parents know, there's always that first cold of the season. And rather than cough and hack my way through an hour talking about Lower Decks with my dear friend Leo, we decided to run a previous episode. So next week, we will most probably review this week's Lower Decks and next week's Lower Decks in one episode, because they're a half an hour and that could easily fit into one of our programs. Excuse me. So without any further delay, before I start coughing my head off, here is our encore presentation of episode 8. There we go. Hello and welcome tonight to Trek Tonight. Tonight's episode 8. Episode 8. Where we're going to be talking about Spock Amok, and we have our special guest Joe Townsel with us tonight, as well as a report from Leo on his trip to the Paley Center and much, much more. So, hit it. Hey there, folks. Let me bring in everybody else here. Leo Genesek, Welcome aboard. And there is some goofy thing going on here. There we go.
Yay.
Goes. And I have to scroll down because we have to get our friend Joe Townsel in here. There is Joe. Joe,
Greetings, guys.
Greetings.
Doing well. How are you guys?
Good.
Yeah. We got a packed show tonight. Because Leo, you went to an exciting exhibit at the Paley Center for Media.
Yes, there's one here in New York where I am, and there's also one in Los Angeles.
Right.
And it's all about
some of the things you saw there. And we're also I'm going to show off a couple of my little hobby things and much more.
Yes.
So Keith Jacobson says, "Hi everyone.
Hello.
Keith.
Good to see you. Your check is in the mail.
Yeah.
No, your pin is in the mail, so you should be getting that shortly, probably in a day or so. And I will remind you, we are talking about the coveted Trek Tonight badge.
Yes.
All right.
The inaugural edition.
The inaugural edition. That's right. Craig Lubin says, no exhibit in Boston?
No.
I guess Boston's not as cultural as they think they are.
Nah.
I lived in Boston for years. I love Boston.
Yay, more people watching live. Yeah.
Yay! That's
right,
fantastic.
yes.
We had, that's Gina says, more people watching live. You know, we had an extraordinary week last week with last week's show because according to Facebook, we hit over 4,000 views, which was fantastic for us. We were very, very excited about that to see the people.
That is incredible.
Yeah. And Eric Hutt says, "Hi guys, where can I get some Romulan ale for medicinal purposes?" Okay, that is an inside joke between Eric and I because he posted, I guess, his experiments with making beer. I think, right, Eric, making beer, and I asked him if he also made Romulan ale and that I only used it for medicinal purposes.
There is some company out there that made or makes Romulan ale. It is it's a beer.
Right.
I've never had it. I
Right.
would definitely drink it. If any of the people who are making it, watching it, we would gladly accept a sample.
Yes, we certainly would. We would love to try it on the air. Exactly.
For
We'll send one out to go, and yep, that would be fantastic. By the way, tonight we have a sort of an appropriate sponsor for the program, a product called Ponfar Ease. Ponfar Ease medicated lotion. When you're far from the home world, remember the name Ponfar Ease. Replicate a jar today.
Yes.
So
you can't get back to Vulcan.
Yeah. We love the folks at Ponfar Ease. Excellent product. I've been holding that sponsor for like about 5 weeks because I knew Spock Amok thing. I sent that to Leo in a text and so that was great. Anyway, what do we want to do? Do we want to get right into the episode?
Yeah, let's get right into the episode, which will help us to be a little more diligent. And I am responsible for us going off course more often than not.
No.
But let's hit the points before the in the cold open, which was
Leo. You just had the director's cut of on the show last week.
Everything I say is the director's cut. Nothing is on the floor. It's all on the screen.
Yeah.
All right, so we start at the cold open. We're on Vulcan, and Spock is going towards an area very much like we saw in Amok Time in the original series. A lot more elaborate. There's lava. There's walkways and columns. Nice to see you, Christopher and Leo. I'm impressed you're still at it after all these years. Thank you, Craig Robin.
Thank you, Craig Robin. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah,
it has been a really long time.
It has
Craig Robin, we've known also since we were kids.
Yes.
Wow. And he's also the brother of a very good friend of ours as well. So
yes.
We've known Craig a long time. Okay, I'm sorry, Leo. Go ahead.
So it's a much more elaborate setup. There's this giant walkway and columns, and it looks like Spock's about to get married. There's the There's that special gong,
Right.
and everybody's all gussied up in their Vulcan best. And then T'Pring walks out in this very sexy Vulcan wedding gown. And she's like, I can't marry you. Your ears. You're human. And suddenly he's no longer in his Vulcan gear. He's wearing a Starfleet uniform.
Right.
And Kuna Khalifi is invoked. And then he has to fight himself. Boom. And there's a little bit of that Amok Time music underneath.
Right.
It was a chef's kiss. I love that. I love the testes. And he's about to be impaled on the Lurpa. When he wakes up, it's a nightmare. And so it's nice to know that Vulcans have nightmares too. Don't forget the shaky bells. Yes, those
jingle bells.
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's just talk about this cold open, because I thought it was fantastic. Number one, you get to see a lot more of Vulcan in a way.
Yes.
Great wide shots, some fantastic CG stuff where you get to see more of the crane and buildings and things like that, which was great. And I'm assuming that is a young T'Pau officiating there. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Maybe. I don't know what the difference in time between this and Amok Time is.
Right.
10 or 11 years, I would think. If this
10
is,
or 11 years.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
I know Vulcans live a long time. And T'Pau was, being carried on a litter, and she was played by a much older actress. But maybe it was.
Who looks astonishing like my little old Italian grandmother. Seriously, that's like I watch that every time I see that episode. I go, "Hey, Nana, how are you?"
Well, good point though that Vulcans are extremely long-lived. I think I mentioned in a comment on one of the other shows is that the character of T'Pol was supposed to be T'Pau in Enterprise,
right?
But it would have required royalties throughout the series and so forth. That
Right.
it could have also been possibly the Vulcan High Priestess, if that's the correct title that we saw in Star Trek 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't. It's unclear. I mean, I would have if it was T'Pau, I would have liked to have seen her being carried on that litter. I like that.
Yeah.
That. But I'm not sure who it was. I mean, it's a dream, so it's when you have a dream, you're like, I'm talking to this guy, and it seems it's my brother, but he doesn't look anything like my brother. But I know it's my brother. So
yeah, and you mentioned the music, and I was just so thrilled to hear the Amok Time music in there. Fantastic.
Oh, verbatim, which was great.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Joe. What was that?
I say verbatim, which was great.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a similar thing. It was
right.
That was it.
That was it. Yeah.
Woven
I thought those were all great touches. And
now was I the only one that was also reminded possibly of the Superman Clark Kent fight in Superman 3 in the junkyard?
A little bit, as Nurse Chapel will say later on, Vulcans don't do subtle.
Right.
It's a very literal conflict within him. So then he's getting ready for T'Pring to show up, and he's getting his quarters spiffy. He adjusts these two crystal glasses, in between the bottle. And she comes in, and she's like, well, this is kind of like a human. They also start with he parted and never parted, touching and always touched.
Yes.
Which we remember from the original Amok Time.
Right.
I love a callback. There's lots of them in this episode.
Yep.
And then, she's sort of criticizing his decor. She kind of feels like a human. I can't imagine a Vulcan ever slept in here. It's like, well, it's a work in progress. She's like, well, I'll reserve judgment till you. But she also then moves the glasses back to where he had he adjusted them and she adjusts them back.
Right.
So they're already got that sort of old couple dynamic going on. Yeah. And they have a bit of an argument about decor and duty, as I said. And he's like, well, listen, I know I was supposed to spend all this time with you, but I've been called to a diplomatic emergency.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to attend to that, but I'll be back. And, she's like, well, are you disappointed? She says, no, I anticipated. I'm merely being realistic, which is a cold cut. Cold lunch from T'Pring. So then he goes off to help with negotiations with the Rungovians, who apparently are situated between the Klingon Empire and the Romulan Star Empire.
Right.
And Robert April is returned, and he's like, "Listen, we got to get we have to get this because otherwise, we're if they ally with one of our enemies, we're going to be in real trouble. We
Right.
need this, to bring them
Although
back."
I have to wonder, wouldn't the Klingons just conquer them if they needed their space?
Possibly, but
Yeah.
we don't know what other wars the Klingons are currently fighting.
It's true.
Keith comments, T'Pring is a master of passive aggressive.
That's a very Vulcan trait, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So now the Rongovians have shown up a day early. After also, Pike gets a video of them negotiating with the Tellarite, and Rongovian just like yelling at this Tellarite, yelling him stupid. And
Right.
Pike's like, "Listen, I thought the Tellarites were argumentative." It was like, "Well, listen, let's see if we can do better." And they go and the guys show up, like they're a day early, and they're like a little salty, but Pike is like, "Not a problem. We're happy to meet you." It's him and his first officer. These aliens, and then he's immediately much warmer to Pike. Like, "Well, let's sit down." Oh, her's there too, both transcribe, I imagine, like record things, and also for her linguistics and first contact skills. So then Ortega's go down to sick bay to get Mabenga. It's shore leave time, and he's like, "Oh, okay, hold on, let me just grab my stuff." And they're like, "Oh, aren't you supposed to meet?" And I stupidly didn't write this woman. She's like an expert of the field. And Ortega's like, "Oh, is this like a hookup thing?" And he's like, "No, she's like an expert." And like, yeah, Ortega's like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." So they go down, and then they hit the they go to the transport, and also you find out that Chapel is kind of a non-commitment. She's like hooking up with this guy, and she's like, "Listen, he knows the score. It's just fun. There's no ties. We're just we're just enjoying ourselves." And so they go down to the transporter room where number one and La'an are there to see not so much to see them off, but Ortega's like, "You don't really need to be here." She's like, "I do if I want to make sure it's done correctly, like keep who's on and off." And they're like, "Oh, what are you guys doing?" She's like, "Well, these guys aren't shore leave is shore stay." And then Mabenga goes, "Oh yes, the nickname." And they're like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Oh, I forget about it. I just know I forgot. I'm just sort of." And they've also made fun of his fishing hat. He's wearing like a very old school fishing hat.
Yeah.
And they finally say, "One where fun goes to die," which is kind of a long nickname, but maybe not inaccurate.
Yeah.
So they're like, "Huh."
So what I love
that could have been the name of the episode instead of Spock Amok almost.
Yeah. What I loved about this was, again, you get to see the camaraderie amongst the crew. I mean, you now realize, okay, so Chapel and Ortega, because they're around the same age and level, they're both, obviously they've done things together. Yeah. Mabenga's all, they're able to, josh him and tease him about his hat. And then it just shows the relationship of these people that are all in this ship, and they're all now here's one thing I didn't quite follow through, and that is, are they on shore leave and at space dock because of what happened to the Enterprise last week? Okay, so that did follow through from one episode.
Yeah, which is a nice touch because oftentimes there's a hard reset. But they're space dock in orbit around Earth, where they have all those biodomes, as we saw in the first episode.
Right.
And so they're getting shore leave while the ship gets repaired. Which is
Spock did mention that in his commander's log.
Yes, in his science officer's log.
Right.
And again, I agree. I love seeing the camaraderie amongst the characters.
Right.
And I like in Ortega's like with her guy. She's like, "You want to set up a hand signal, or should I'll call you and you can?" She's like, "No. He knows what the score is. We'll be fine."
Yeah.
So then Spock gets back to his cabin, and he and T'Pring have a Vulcan-style fight, which is a lot of, passive. it's sort of a weird combination of aggressive. It's not really aggressive. She's not because she's a Vulcan, but she's basically saying like, "Listen, I put up my duties." But you find out that her job is she is sent to corral Vulcans who've left the way of logic, who've sort of gone rogue, and bring them back and have them rehabilitated. So she's almost like a cop in a way.
Yeah, like a bounty hunter.
A bounty hunter kind of.
Yeah.
And she's like, basically, I brought somebody with me to take care of that so I could spend time with you. And then you run off and do this thing because he's late to supper. And then she's like, well, I'm sure you have, I'll let you prepare for your many duties or your.
Yeah.
And she leaves and there's all this food there. And Spock is like, well, I really fucked that up. You know, in his Spock-like way.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the cold open, which is a lot happened in that cold open. It was about 15 minutes.
I was going to say it must be the longest one yet.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I said earlier when we were hanging out in the green room, I said, you know, I almost forgot at that point that I hadn't even seen the opening because it had been going on for so long. Yeah. And the opening starts to run. I'm like, oh yeah. That's
so
there it is.
So let's we've got this first chunk. Joe, what were your thoughts on the opening of the episode?
Well, again, I so far so good. I mentioned elsewhere that not to insult Vulcans, but I think T'Pring is bringing a lot of humanity to this character. They never saw the opportunity to see in the original series, and I hope that we'll get to see a lot more before their inevitable ultimate separation.
Right.
So that's great. I do like the lighthearted nature. We do have at this point halfway through the season. I can't believe it's halfway through.
I know.
We've got our first contact episode. We have our submarine. The comet's going to kill everybody. Now we have our comedy, but thankfully not a boffo super hijinks comedy. Just enough to be amusing and fun.
Yeah,
there was hijinks.
There was
hijinks. I think Vulcans invented the word. Actually, I think we picked it up from them.
We might have. Yeah.
There's nothing funnier than having a Vulcan say, "Hi, I do not care for hijinks."
Yeah.
She said, the episode.
But one thing I also enjoyed about the interplay with Spock and T'Pring at this point, it changes later when they come to understand each other better. But their interplay, as far as like being very, very standoffish almost and stiff, especially on her part, it really reminded me of that one great scene in Star Trek 2009, the first J.J. Abrams movie,
right,
where Spock manages to tell the Vulcan elders, live long and prosper. He makes it sound like a total FU.
Yeah,
that's kind of the vibe I was speaking up here. But again, as a foreknote to what's to come.
Right. Well, Craig Lubin refers to her as a logic cop.
Yep. I think that's right.
The scariest kind of all.
The Inquisition, Eric Hutz, who I know for a fact is a Monty Python fan.
There you go. We're in the comfy chair.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
We're at the end of the cushion. All right. So
stuffing up one end. Anyway, before I go on a total Monty Python.
Yeah.
Let's go to continue. Now, Chapel is now in a bar somewhere on the station, looking gorgeous in this
my God.
Kind of mod dress, which is a nice sort of nod to the 60s. I mean, she is an absolutely stunning actress.
Oh yeah.
And the black and white, I love that. I've always loved that look.
Right.
I'm a big fan of the mod look.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's I would like to see that fashion come back. It probably will briefly and then disappear again. But I've always loved that. And she's out with her hookup, and he's like, "Oh, you look hot. Do you think I look hot?" She's like, "Yeah, I guess." He's like,
"He's just in a uniform."
And he's, well, we're two flames. She's like, "Okay." She's like, "Listen, you want to get out of here?" And he's like, "Well, why not? But I'm hungry." She's like, "Well, we can eat anytime. Let's go and have some fun."
Right.
And he's being like, "Well, I thought we could talk about us." And he's like, and you can see sort of like the light dye in her eye. This guy, as I refer to him, a handsome dud. He's like, it's a good-looking guy, but he's just like, you cannot read the room.
No.
And then she's
Well,
like,
pardon my language, but he's his own cock blocker.
yeah,
What's up?
Very true.
he is. But
It's
then,
like when you sit there and you think back over your life
yeah,
at moments you really wish you had gone a different way.
yeah,
You would play them differently. This is his moment, one of those moments for him. Yeah.
it is. Let's. I'm flashing back to something from my teenage years.
Yeah.
Not pretty for me. Anyway,
Exactly.
so
Ending your life.
so she sees Spock eating dinner like a little bit away. She's like, "Oh, I really have to go talk to my friend. Like, I'll call you later." You know,
Right.
she's not calling this guy later.
No.
And she goes off and talks with Spock, and then we flash back to number one and Lon walking down the hall, and they're discussing her nickname, and they're like, "Well, we're fun," and they're talking about like, she's like, "Well, I was really looking." She's like, "It's great. The ship is practically empty. You know, you hear all you can hear is the thrum of the engines of the warp core." She's like, "It's like," Lon goes, "It's like Christmas," which is maybe the saddest thing ever said. And they're both like, "Hey, listen, I'm going to go over duty rosters. Well, I was going to check the armory." They're like, you know, which sounds like two of the dullest things you could possibly do in the 23rd century. But then they
It's almost like two spelling bee kids. You know?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
But even two spelling bee kids are having more fun than they are. Anyway, so then an alarm goes out that there's a security breach, and Lon's like, "Who's backup?" And no one's like, "Forget it, I'm your backup." She's like, "They're all wrong. You are fun." That's her interpretation. So they go over. They've got phasers, and they get to this airlock. They open it up, and there's two like cadets in there in vac suits, and they're like, "Ah, we're the crew. We're the crew."
Right.
One of them is, I think, she was a communications officer who was sitting in for Uhura in an earlier episode.
Yeah, we've seen her before.
Yeah, she was in the Comet episode, I believe, when Uhura was down on the planet. She was at comms.
And the Bolian is just
the Bolian is new, but it's cool to see a Bolian.
Oh yeah,
in there, and
nice enhancement on the look too. I thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she looked great.
So when we go back to the bar, Chapel calls Spock out for not putting T'Pring before duty. He even does like slaps him. And said, "What is that? I'm familiar with this human gender." He was like, it's to discourage like bad behavior, and he tells her about his dream, and as Vulcans don't do subtle, and then they she helps him out. She's like, "Listen, you got to put yourself in her shoes. You've got to see things from her perspective, and make sure that she knows that she's important to you, that she's a priority." Right. And then she says, and he thanks her for that. And she says, "Well, what are friends are for?" And he goes, "What are friends for?" It's just a thing. He says, "It seems that humans are as easy to tease as Vulcans are," which is a nice little like I like seeing Spock. It's like a little, wow, that's a little humorous moment for him.
Well, that was a very Spock McCoy type moment, I thought.
Yes,
it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think that what's nice about it is this portrayal of Spock really feels to me like you're seeing him younger.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So he might play around a little bit more with his interaction with humans. He hasn't gotten to the point where he needs to be stoic yet. Yeah. Even though he's struggled with his human side, obviously. But I like that. I like this version of Spock because I think it does show him as what he might have been as a younger man.
Yeah, I would agree. There's one last scene. They go back and Spock proposes a ritual in which they share their soul sharing ritual with their Katras, so they can know each other fully. So they do it. Lots of candles, hand gestures, Vulcan chanting, and the lights go out like when it's over. And then not only have they shared their Katras, they have switched bodies. It is Star Trek Freaky Friday.
Yeah.
And then act break. So let's like Joe. We've discussed a little bit, but your thoughts about this part of the show, like Joe and Chris. What do you?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if this was, they played it straight just enough so it wouldn't be totally ridiculous.
Right.
I, of course, was reminded also of Turnabout Intruder, but a very easily rectified one.
Right.
And without the stakes, obviously.
Yeah.
So it worked. I didn't know what to make of it when it first happened. Go, okay. Especially with the ease of the resolution later. But, I think it's a very rare Star Trek episode that can have not just an A and a B, but a C story.
Yeah.
True.
And intersect just enough, just have enough levity and lightness to make it fun and entertaining. So at this point, I'm still in. It didn't remove me from it at all. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a good character exploration. As a matter of fact, is I thought it ended up being a little bit short shift. I think we could have done a little bit more with it.
At first, Keith Jacobson's first, I cringed a little when I realized it was a Freaky Friday, but they did it well, and I enjoyed it. I'd heard that there was going to be a Freaky Friday, and I was like, okay.
I hadn't heard any of that, so the episode went in a totally different direction than I expected it to, which I thought was cool, because I wasn't expecting. I expected we were going to see a lot of, stuff on Vulcan.
I do too, but it was that opening was just enough, and it. Like I said, there's a lot of Freaky Friday in space. Anything is better when it's in space.
The episode could have almost had a different title, and I like that. I think the title's great, Spock Amok, but it really accounted for literally like 1/3 of the story.
It's true, right? But it is.
Eric says, "Set up the smelly sea urchin paste moment."
Yes, we'll get to that.
Yeah,
I thought everything in this part of the show, this segment, was doing a lot of great character work. Everybody, you got insights into people's characters,
right?
Through their actions, and we teamed up La'an and number one. We're both sort of this. I wouldn't say La'an is sort of the stiffest. She's the most like rules person on the ship. But I guess number one is, and then we also get there. She's like, well, I can't really be part of the crew because I'm the XO. And she said, well, that's not why. He said, well, why is it? She says, well, because you're terrified.
Because you terrify people. Yeah. I actually thought that this was great because I wasn't a tremendous Lan fan of all the characters. She was the least that I resonated with, but I thought in this episode, the two of them were just fantastic. And you got to see more of Lan, and you also got to see a different side of Una, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it.
And in addition to that, Chris, I thought that was really good as well because it lightened her up a little bit. She's a little bit intense up until now.
Right.
Plus, on the opposite end of the spectrum, finally, Ortegas's little snarky quips seem to have a place and fit.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So we're moving on to the next part of the show. Admiral Abel comes and visits Pike and says the Mongolians don't want to talk to you anymore. They only want to talk to Spock. And he's like, and they're like, he says, I don't know if that was a bad diplomatic session. I don't know what a good one is supposed to look like.
Right. Yeah, because they seemed very, very open to whatever Pike had to say. It was a very reasonable. You see them in there initially, and they're all, and after having seen them talk to the Tellarites, they're all thinking, well, they're going to be very combative. But then he offers him a meal, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. If we'd known you were coming early, we could have prepared an Earth meal for you." And then all of a sudden, he's just warm and friendly.
So they
there's a reason.
Yeah. So now Spock and T'Pring are trying to reverse it. They've tried a number of rituals, none of which have worked. And it is sort of a subtle difference between the way the actors portray themselves body switch. And how
did you think of that, guys? What were your thoughts on the way they did that?
I thought that this is pretty apparent to me, but I think it was an excellent choice of line. It was funny and really made it more believable when Spock says, "Now that you're aware of what's happened, surely you can detect our different mannerisms."
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And since they were almost no different, that really just lended some credibility to the fact that they're very similar. You know?
They're doing that, and then the door, somebody, rings the bell, and they were like, "What are you going to do?" And Spock, as T'Pring says, "Whoever answers the door is who is at the door expects me to answer it, so you must answer it." I got to, and they're like sort of debating, so they do it, and then Pike says, "Listen, the Mongovians only want to talk to you, Spock," and he's like, I'm really in the middle of something, Captain." T'Pring calls him Captain, and then Spock calls him Chris, and it's kind of like, which is a difference between the two, because
Right.
refers to Pike as Chris,
Right.
and so on, and then they fess up to what's going on, and there's obviously you could have told because of our very distinctive speech patterns or distinctive traits, and he goes, "Yeah, there's like,
oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, sure. Let's say
something bizarre happens at least once every 7 days, at least 10 weeks out of the year, right? So par for the course.
I don't want to. This is a very stressful thing. I don't want to ask T'Pring to do it. And she says, "No, I will do it."
Right.
And she's like, "You stay here and try to figure out how to reverse this."
Yeah.
So now we get the good cop, bad cop with the ensigns with Una. And La'an is the bad cop. They call it just before they go in to speak to them.
Yeah.
And La'an gets to be bad cop, which clearly she wants to be bad cop.
Right.
And she's just like, "You don't know how much trouble you're in, Ensign. You may end up being court-martialed." And Una's like, "Listen, I just want to find out what's going on. She wants coffee." She's talking to the bully, and La'an is talking to the human. And they're going, and it's a cut back and forth. And it's a nice parallel between the two of them. And they're like, all right. Like the whole thing, they explain that it's Enterprise bingo. Like they have to do these silly tasks.
Right.
And they're like, well, we're going to cancel your shore leave, and you're going to have to micro cleanse the transport pads under the supervision of Chief Kyle. And the human goes, "Chief Kyle, but he's so mean." And I'm like, we've never seen that, so I don't know.
I wanted to talk about that a little. Where is that coming from?
I don't know where that came from, and I don't know whether she's like briar patching her, like the Brer Rabbit, don't throw me, throw me the briar patch. But she seemed genuinely terrified of Kyle.
No, I prefer to think that he really is a SOB. We just haven't seen it yet.
Maybe he's really rough with people who work under him.
Yes,
he's pretty affable. Because earlier, when Una asked Kyle after they beamed everybody down for shore leave, she's like, "Have you heard this nickname?" He goes, "Yes, no." He's just like, obviously, it's all kind of a lower deck kind of thing,
right?
Where they.
I love that Una says it wrong at some point.
Yeah, later
funeral.
And then she goes, "No, it's where you goes to die."
Yeah,
it's different. Anyway, so they're like, and they send them out, and Ona goes, "What the hell is Enterprise bingo?" They've never heard of it before. We've heard it referenced by Ortegas in the second episode, when Uhura goes to the captain's table in dress uniform, and it's "come as you are."
Right.
So they're like, we'll find out later what Enterprise bingo is. So Spock is, as T'Pring is back in his quarters, he gets a message from T'Pring's coworker, who's basically like this renegade Vulcan who they've come to escort back.
Right.
Will only surrender to her. She's like, "Listen, I'm very busy. She's like, "I wouldn't do this. I know how important this is to you, but, she quotes, throws some logic and Vulcan duty at her, and she's like, "Very well, I will go and do this. I have to go get this guy." Apparently, from what I gathered from this episode, Vulcans who decided to reject logic and sort of go off on their own are, as Craig Lubin referred to it early, logic cops. They're trying to bring them back into the fold,
right?
Rehabilitated. So which is a job I didn't know existed, or a problem that I didn't know existed either.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of interesting. And it's nice to know that T'Pring is not just like some trust fund kid. So
I would have enjoyed just a sly reference to Cybok at that point. I once had a brother who did something similar, and
right.
You know where he is, but maybe we'll see him again someday.
I think they're trying to forget Cybok. I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Listen, Cybok and Tuvix are. I imagine them living in a house by the sea together on a planet by themselves.
Well, I hope they're very happy.
I hope so.
Speaking of, I loved that the bit in the when they're doing the they're going through the list of things, and wait a minute, here we go. No, there is never a moment to remember Cybok, according to
You're probably right, Keith.
Yeah.
According to Keith Jacobson.
Yes. No, what I was gonna say is I loved the bit on the list of the bingo with the transporter and the chewing gum.
Yes.
So clearly they had taken her pattern before when she first put the gum in her mouth.
Yeah.
And then she chews it, and then they beam her and rematerialize her with her old pattern, and the gum has flavor again.
Or they just beam the new flavor directly into the gum on the return.
I don't know. That's a good question. What do you think that was? I thought it was the thing that I always argued, which was that if you had somebody's pattern and a buffer, you could just return them to whatever state they were before.
Yeah.
Something happened. And I assumed that it was a silly way of proving that with the chewing gum, but you could be right. They could have been. I'm trying to remember now because I only got to watch it once this week. I was today. You see her actually beam or no?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
And she chews the gum until the flavor is gone. It beams it and it goes spearmint.
Right.
We will get to that.
And you're right, Chris. I mean, that was established as far as pulling back from an old pattern. If you have the pattern and the DNA, some sample DNA available, unnatural selection and TNG with Dr. Pulaski.
Yeah. Right. Listen, if the argument is that it's too much data to hold on to, although, that is an argument based on an old supposition of technology. There you can buy a thumb drive that has more storage than a home computer from like the 1990s.
Right.
And that's like some of the lower end thumb drives. So, technology, a lot of it is based on what we perceive technology to be at the time. So there you go.
I derived my theory as far as just beaming the flavor into the old gum, so to speak. I kind of got that from the pilot when Cal was able to beam the stuff right into Spock's eyeball.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So now, number one, you find out exactly what Enterprise Bingo is. They La'an confiscated a pad out of some ensign's quarters. There's like routine inspection. And when it gives her like kind of a side eye. She's like, "You're like just doing my job." So they're like, "Well, this is kind of ridiculous, but maybe we should try it out." So we can understand what the crew like. And they're like, "Okay." So the first one is the reflavored gum with the transporter,
right?
And that works. And also, I love his little note where when she taps the pad and you hear the first three notes of the Star Trek theme.
Yes, that was so neat.
Lovely little touch.
Yeah.
The next thing is Turbo Lift two floor shout challenge, where they're both in the Turbo Lift and they each grab one of the handles and they do it and they each shout out a location, and Una wins that one, and because she goes engineering and Lan's like best to attitude.
Yeah. That was a great moment.
And then they do a phaser stun duel where they're standing in a hallway. It's funny because they both are aiming their phasers. They're not drawing. They're not doing like high noon.
Right. No, they're not really doing it right.
In
my opinion.
Listen, there are two people who one of these people's nickname is "Where Fun Goes to Die."
Yeah. I mean, in my assessment of that particular task and the challenge list, that it's kind of like the Old West. It's like a gunslinger thing.
It is.
And but that's fine.
And then Ortega shoots her, like gets her in the shoulder, and they put it at lowest settings. She goes, "Ow,
Yeah.
Stings.
Stings. Yeah.
That might be a byproduct of her genetic manipulation." So then Ortegas and Chapel are discussing her casual dating problems because apparently, I guess she did talk to the handsome dud again, and she's like, "Yeah, he read me some of his poetry." She's well, how? Oh, she's like, "Oh, how was it?" She's like, "Surprisingly, not terrible,
Not bad. Yeah.
not bad." Then Spock, as T'Pring shows up, they're like, "Oh, that's Spock's girlfriend." She's like, "Oh, she looks pissed off." And then she's like, Chapel's like, "Well, I did give Spock some dating advice."
Right.
I was like, "Oh, don't get involved. Don't get in the middle of a Vulcan relationship. This is you'll be hit with a lurpa." She's like, "I've been hit with a lurpa. I've got scars." So
she actually pronounces it slightly differently, which I liked.
yeah, she had
Called it a liurpa.
Lurpa. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't
She
know.
put an accent on it, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, so never get in the middle of a Vulcan relationship that will hit you with a Lurpa.
Yeah.
So she goes up and T'Pring, aka Spock, says she wishes to talk to Chapel alone, and Ortega's like, "Well, see you later."
Yeah, right. Yeah. Again, I just love that character. I love her. I don't know why. It's just really fun.
So then number one they feel like, well, we've done all this stuff from Enterprise Bingo, but we're like, it's weird. She says we're breaking the rules, but we're the ones who make the rules, so it feels like counterintuitive, and
Right.
I'm not sure I get this. And they've got one more thing. She's like, well, you have to figure out a different way to break the rules, which is interesting. It was really bad. So now we've got T'Pring as Spock negotiating with the Rungovians, who now are all like suddenly super Vulcan and very about logic and query, response, and so on. And T'Pring says, I somehow I have misgivings about spending all this time traveling the galaxy. I feel like I should be on Vulcan exploring my heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And Pike, who's watching it with Admiral April, gets up and he's like, "No, you're not supposed to, because they're only there as like a courtesy, is to watch. You're not supposed to say anything."
Right.
And then Pike says, "Well, I'd like to say something," and the XO from the Rungovians is like, "You cannot. This is not permitted." He says, "Well, I don't want to speak to you guys. I want to say something about Spock."
Right.
So I say something to Spock, and the captain's like, "All right, we'll allow it." And he basically gives a very warm speech about how Spock does sacrifice a lot. He spends, in his pursuit of intellectual excellence and everything he does, and the fact that he does spend so much time away from his home. And he says, "This is everything that's great about Starfleet is right here, sitting in that chair."
Right.
And,
and the guy then is impressed with him defending his officer.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
The turning point.
It was it was another Pike speech of the week, which was great, and he's
really good at those speeches. He knows how to talk to people.
And it's funny because the other night I was having terrible sinus problems, and I apologize. That's why you see me with the tissues and stuff, and I sound kind of weird. But I was up watching old Treks, and there's the episode, and now I'm trying to remember which one it is in, but it's the one where Kirk goes on his thing. We have it at the beginning of the show. Our job is risk.
Yeah.
That's why we're out here. That's why we're aboard the Enterprise. And he was doing one of his speeches. And it was just really funny because the captain giving a big speech, to make a point, goes all the way back to TOS, but I don't know that it was even done quite as well or as effectively. I'm going to probably get some hate mail about that, but
chronologically, Kirk learned from the best from Pike.
And I did think of that too. I thought to myself, okay, so if you're really being chronological, Pike was his commanding officer, and he might have picked that up from him.
Yeah,
no doubt in my mind.
It's really kind of cool. So there's a reason for it that maybe Pike might have been a little bit better at it than James. But hey, yeah.
So that now we have another break. Go to imaginary commercial. It is interesting that these shows are
Ponfaris. Medicated lotion.
Gotta give me some of that.
God, we will send you a jar.
Thank you.
So it out.
Now we get right. Now we see Mabenga fly fishing.
Right.
And he's got his dopey dad cap on, and he's putting on his lure, and he's got his fishing gear, and and unfortunately, the woman he was supposed to meet, this other doctor, does not show up in this episode. So that's might have ended up on the cutting room floor.
I wonder about that.
So it's a little bit disappointing, but it's okay. We get to see a nice moment of him just enjoying himself.
Right.
He's the only one who just thoroughly enjoys his shore leave. Like, Pike gives good speech. He does.
Now I'm going to jump. Just hang on to your thought 1 second, because I didn't just. I sneak a treble into the transporter buffer was one of the bingo items. Shame they didn't work that into the episode.
We do have a full list of the Enterprise bingo, which we'll reveal towards the end.
Yeah.
Rather than get too bogged down in that, but it is delightful. So Spock explains to Chapel what happens, and of course Chapel immediately laughs. She's like, "I'm sorry," but she's like, "Is there a medical solution to this problem?"
Right.
She's like, "Well, medical solutions take a bit of time, but you have an opportunity to gain an insight into Pring's life." She says, "What do you mean?"
Right.
Like, "I think you should go in and bring this guy in. That Pring is supposed to." And she says, "Well, I'll do it if you come with me," which he agrees to do. So they go and visit this guy who's sitting in, I guess it's like a park. I'm not sure, wherever they shot this, probably in Vancouver by a lake. And there's a bunch of people playing 3D chess, and you even see an Andorian in the background. And this guy, Tadur, the renegade Vulcan, and T'Pring comes up and it's basically are you here to turn yourself up? And this guy is pretty obstreperous to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
You support our way of life by bringing in renegades with one hand, but reject it with the other by being engaged to this half-human son of Sarek, and he's being really argumentative, using a lot of straw man arguments about why. He was like, "I really consider doing this, but I'm not sure I can now," which feels like he's just jerking around. And Chapel's like, "That's bullshit, because you want something, you're here. If you weren't here, you wouldn't. If you didn't want something, you wouldn't be here." And she's like, makes a comment about how humans are descended from apes, and they retain many of their charming qualities, which is really that is some cold Vulcan lunch.
Why I oughta.
Some cold plummeek soup.
Yeah, there it is. And they get they're arguing, and this guy it feels like he's jerking her around. And eventually Spock gets up. Spock, as T'Pring, he gets up, and she just clocks him and knocks him out. And she's like, "Perhaps you should not repeat the manner in which I brought in this individual." So it was nice, and also because Chapel's like, "I work with Spock. He's twice the Vulcan you are," and he's like I'm gonna believe a human. And this guy's.
Yeah, the guy was a real douche. I mean, it was great, because it was. And now let me ask you about that. So Spock clocks him.
Yeah.
Did that seem Spock-like?
No less Spock-like than when he laughed during Children of the Comet.
I'm just curious.
Some flashes of emotion. I mean, they're there.
Yeah.
I think
that. I think the circumstances under which he's struggling is, i.e., being trapped in his fiance's body during all this, trying to emulate her as much as he can. It didn't ring false to me that he just lost and punched him.
Spock is under a lot of stress at that point.
Yeah.
So
no, and I think it's in that conversation with Chapel, isn't it? Where she says, "Oh, wow, that's, you're in the body of your fiance. That's really interesting." And she's thinking of all kinds of ways that could be interesting.
Yeah.
You clearly, because you
Yeah.
can see the wheels turning. And then Spock is sitting there and he
Yeah.
looks down for just a brief second. And it was just really funny to me because
I
it
had
made
not
me think of all
considered
those wacky teen movies from the 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then Spock and T'Pring get brought into sickbay, and Dr. Mabega, from the trailer, we get to see his sea urchin goo spread on their foreheads, and they put some crystals on it. He said that the electromagnetically, it's a good match for Vulcan skin.
Right.
And basically, they need to sort of run like a shock through them, and it should switch them back. And they do that, and before he does it, Chapel says to him, he says, they're both kind of nerve pinches after this.
Right, yeah.
And he laughs, like, perhaps, and it works. They go back to their proper bodies, which is nice. And then Spock does thank Chapel for help, and she's like, "Oh, it's no big deal." He says, "Well, for me, it was a big deal." And she basically says, "I think you need to be honest about what you can offer in your relationship with T'Pring, and I think that might be helpful." And he thanks her for that. So then, T'Pring and Spock, their bodies, they're back in their normal bodies, or their proper bodies, I should say, have a heart to heart. And he basically says, like, I was afraid that you would that I was not Vulcan enough because of my human side. I've always struggled with it. I've always been challenged when I was on Vulcan. I feel more at peace in Starfleet because people accept me for who I am.
Right.
And she was like, "Well, I know that you value duty, and I thought you maybe viewed our marriage, our impending marriage, as a duty, and I don't want you to do that." And then he's like, "That's not the case."
Right.
And they kiss, and they do a classic Hollywood pan up as
as they fall back onto the bed.
Yes. They which is nice to see that they've come to that understanding. They both finally had to sort of maybe, as they say, walk a mile in each other's shoes.
Right.
Get an insight into each other.
Right.
So now the final negotiations with the Mongovians happen. And they're like, "Well, why should we join the Federation?" Like says, "Try something different." Goes, "You probably should." He says, "Listen, whatever you get, like we just finished a war with the Klingons. I don't know who we're going to piss off next.
Right.
Like if there's going to be trouble, and it's probably going to come from us. Whatever you get from us, increased trade or maybe some technological advances, it's going to be a problem. There will be problems. So maybe you shouldn't. Maybe it's better if you don't do it." And Admiral April is like, "What are you doing, Pike?"
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And they're like, "Huh?" He says,
"Thank you." And the guy says, "Thank you."
Yeah.
And they leave, which I thought was really kind of cool because, it was interesting that they after the business with him defending Spock, that they specifically said, "Well, we would like Captain Pike to do the summation."
Yeah.
They wanted him to do that. They wanted him to come in. And he just decided it was a gamble, but he decided on a hunch that maybe the reason that they all, every time you would see them with a different race of people, the Tellarites they were argumentative with, when they were talking to Spock, they were very Vulcan.
Yeah.
When they were talking to him, they were very human. So that maybe they all take on the quality of the people they're with. And what they really wanted was someone to take on their quality and be, tell them something that they were feeling.
Yeah.
I think that's all very true, Chris. And I also want to throw out a kudos to Admiral Robert April, because as far as being one of the best admirals we've seen ever, because his instinct was to jump and says, "What the hell are you doing?"
Right.
But he sat back and just waited, and his faith was justified.
He may be the first competent flag officer that we've seen.
I think so.
A lot of them seem like they're a little too removed from everything.
Well,
At
yeah,
least he's not a
they
total
were either
knee-jerk
too
reactor
removed-
like most of them seem to be.
Yeah, right. They're either too removed or they're plotting for some,
Secrets,
yeah, some
cool,
hijinks.
some hijinks.
Yeah.
So they then we get to, and as they're saying this, they see because the Rongovians have arrived in a solar sail spaceship.
Yeah, which was very cool.
And
A nice callback to the Bajorn.
Yeah, the Bajorans.
Yeah.
And we did mention this earlier, but one of their customs is when they make an alliance, they fly the flag of their new ally, and then they fly the flag of the Federation as their ship takes off. And it's like that was a kind of a neat moment to see.
Yeah, hey, look, they're flying our flag.
Yeah, it was very cool. So then we
you know where else you heard the solar sail thing? You heard that in Voyage Home.
Yeah.
One of the ships.
Makeshift solar sail. Yeah.
Yeah, and he says we're trying to implement the solar sail. Yeah, it's they've mentioned the solar sail then too. Yeah. We have high hopes,
which does have a basis in actual science.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it would look.
There's Craig Lubin. Oh, wait a minute. Craig also did say Admiral.
The best endorsement of all, right there.
Not crazy.
Of an admiral.
Yeah. Not crazy. Not Admiral Crazy. Yeah.
And so then we see Spock and they're enjoying a post-coital moment where he says, "I must confess, when I brought in your fugitive, I punched him." He says, "Well, knowing him, that is a logical response."
Yeah.
Which
was cute. That was a really cute moment.
It was very cute. And then they pan up and we see the Rogovian ship sailing.
Right.
And they start playing a song, which I don't know the name of the song, but it feels like a 20th century Earth song.
Yeah.
Beautifully sung.
I'd heard it before. I've heard it
before, but I don't know.
I'm trying to think of where, but I'd heard it before.
The first lyric I thought, are we hearing a song version of "Looking for Parmok in All the Wrong Places"?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But then we see and they start music, and it sort of plays over the end of the episode as we're pulling into the end of the episode. And it's the first time I've ever seen a Star Trek episode end with a song.
Yeah.
Which was nice.
That's true.
That's the first, I believe.
So what did you guys think of them completing the bingo by signing the
I like that.
Very nice touch.
But they found their way, so they, rather than doing it in vac suits, they set up a force field so they could walk on the surface of the disc. And then
minor nitpick though, would there be artificial gravity pulling down from the top of the hull? Why aren't they just floating off?
Yeah.
Maybe they had grab boots. I don't know. I'm not going to.
They did show their feet, and I said, "Are those the regular boots, or is that something else? Maybe they were grab boots."
We'll have to go back and do a frame grab of that. Yeah.
A wizard did it.
Wizard did it. Yeah.
I wonder if that piece of the hull survived even when they did the refit in the motion picture. Hope so.
That would be cool. That would be really cool.
The
of course, it got destroyed later, but
find out what the burn plate is. The only part of the hull that is still there from the original hull.
Yeah.
Original hull of the ship.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be good luck to go and sign it, and they decide to sign it. And then they get to see the Rongovian ship sail over them, which is a beautiful sight.
Yeah.
And they found their own way of breaking the rules, because not only are they doing an unauthorized spacewalk, they're doing it
without
space suits. So, which is
there
nice.
was a moment there where when the ship is sailing over them, I'm thinking, is that going to hit their force field?
It did.
And it didn't.
Some sort of shabby piloting if they got that close to another ship.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But and we close with Chapel and Ortega's discussing. She dumped the dud, and Ortega's like, "Listen, if you ever get in a relationship, maybe you should just be honest, right up front."
Right.
And she's like, "Well, yeah, probably." And she said, like before, I'm not really a relationship person. And there's also the implication that she had a fling with another woman. That was something that was
I caught
that first scene. And they were like, and Ortega's, well, that was fun. She's like, well, why do you think being shot at by live phaser fire is fun? And she's like, different strokes. And then she's like, she said, well, if I did have a relationship, it'd have to be with the right guy. And then looks like she's about to say something, and Ortega's like, well, what? She's like, nothing. She takes a sip of her drink. And I do feel like this is the germ of the beginning of her crush on Mr. Spock.
Yes, I agree.
And it's weird because ultimately we know that T'Pring and Spock are doomed canonically.
Right.
Yeah.
Which seems a shame because they do seem to be a good couple. I mean, they have.
Well, unless they're planning some kind of a retcon, or who knows what they're going to do with the character.
Who knows? But
as we go forward in this show, it's making T'Pring is becoming more likable, and
she is
going to make her more of a bitch by the time we get to Amok Time.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
T'Pring was really like sort of the Real Housewives of Vulcan in Amok Time.
Well, and think about it. So you had, when was Amok Time? What episode? What season was that?
That was the
first episode, season 2.
Yeah, the first episode, season 2.
So so you've already seen Spock for a whole year, quote unquote. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, without any mention of her at all. So clearly there's a reason she gets annoyed.
Yeah, she's
I mean,
well, as she said, I will not chase you across the galaxy to get married.
Right.
Which is, I think, a fair statement for anybody to make. So, but I feel kind of bad because I feel like they have a nice relationship, at least at this point.
Right.
But I also feel that Chapel and Spock, the actor Ethan Peck, and I should remember the actress who plays Chapel's name.
Jess Bush.
What? Jess Bush. Yes.
Jess Bush,
who is a delight. They have a great chemistry.
Yeah.
She teases him. There's a very flirtatious, wonderful chemistry between the two of them.
Right.
And she's sassy, and he kind of teases back in his manner.
Right.
So I like that is the end of the episode.
Right.
I'm going to say I loved it. When I heard there was going to be a Freaky Friday, I'm like, okay, let's see. But they did a good job with it.
Yeah.
I'm
glad actually that I didn't stumble across.
I wish I hadn't read that
spoiler, because it was a nice surprise. And again, so I don't know if we talked about this just in the green room or here, but I'll reiterate. It was a fun episode.
It was.
So it was a lighthearted episode, and Star Trek TOS always had a lighthearted episode sprinkled in periodically, and this was our Strange New Worlds version of that, which I thought was great.
Well, and look at the combination of what we've had so far. I mean, it reminds me of going back to like Star Trek's 2, 3, and then 4. Well, 2 and 3 were so heavy, so full of death and horror, and so then it was time to have something a little bit lighter for Star Trek 4, and it worked, and so did this.
Right. Keith says, I didn't know ahead of time about the body swap. It took me by surprise. It did to me too.
Me too. I didn't know it was coming.
I just read it, and I mean, I still enjoyed it. I would have liked to have been surprised. I always much rather be surprised.
Oh, sure.
But because they did it in a way that I was like, I don't know how they're going to do it.
Right.
But I like the way they did it. I thought it worked well. It was a wonderful palate cleanser. It's nice to have. Like Joe said, you need that. You need to, after having that last episode, which was they lost 7 crew members. It was Enterprise got beat all to hell.
Right.
They barely got out of that by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah.
You need to have something more lighthearted to follow that.
But another reason I think that these episodes thus far are succeeding very well is that despite the tone of a given episode, that's our episodic approach gives us the ability to have horror one week, comedy the next week, and so on. There are people that say, well, there's this tiny, minute detail that's contradictory in canon to what we saw before. Well, you can't be a slave to that level of canon, in my opinion.
Right.
So, but I haven't seen anything yet that where anybody's out of character within the show and harkening back to the older stuff. I really haven't.
I agree. Right. And let's face it, all the stuff with Ponfar, all that stuff was introduced in that one episode. It was created by, I believe, DC Fontana wrote Amok Time, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
That might have been Theodore Sturgeon, no?
By the way,
One of those great writers.
It might have been Sturgeon. It might have been
it
Sturgeon.
might have been, but
Yeah.
you know, a lot of as again, the old show was written very, very much episode to episode. I mean, they obviously break down the series, and they had scripts written ahead of time, but they also have to they're dealing with budget, and they're not world building in the way, let's say, if you wrote a series of novels set in the same universe.
Right.
They're also somewhat self-contained, and the continuity is it's the same ship, it's the same actors, it's the same characters.
Yeah.
And it doesn't bother me, but I almost wonder, do we even need the previously on Strange New Worlds intro?
I don't think we do, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think they want to remind you of Enterprise Bingo.
They do remind you of the key elements that affect the episode we're out to see, but it's almost so self-contained, but still part of a whole that I wildly successful on that level.
Yeah.
Very pleased.
Okay, guys, we're running over by 7 minutes, which is fine.
Ooh.
But I wanted to see Joe. We haven't talked to you since the very beginning when we were doing our character examinations. So, on the whole, how do you feel about this series?
The series thus far, well, as I said previously, I mean, we're getting a different type of episode every week. We're seeing building and consistent characterizations. I think moving from basically horror to comedy and so forth. I will tell you this: the one thing in this episode that I think would have really benefited the character who's totally missing was Hemmer.
Yeah,
I think Hemmer it would have been a great. I mean, they should have had him fishing with the doctor or something. He should have been in there. But that's what my few nitpicks on this episode or any others for that matter. I really nothing, and you guys know me. I mean, I'm kind of a stickler for those types of things, and I'm not seeing a thing that is just jarring to me and saying, okay, that's a little detail is a little questionable, but you move right on because it's just so entertaining and so much fun depending, no matter what the emphasis is. So halfway point, I think, and I did read that the series is going to hit its stride. And I think I said in our Picarder discussion, sometimes those serialized versions seem to go on too long. This one's going to seem way too short.
Oh, yes. I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about us with Picard or on Starbase 80 with John
right.
Weber. We started out so excited about Picard, and we were all, really pretty hot on it. And then because of that continuing storyline, it became, well, how are they going to resolve this? How are they going to resolve that? And then the audience, can decide whether you think they succeeded or not. We were on the fence. But the bottom line of it is, with these episodes being all self-contained, you really just get to enjoy each one.
Yeah.
And
I'm really hoping that this Strange New Worlds will take on kind of an approach that The Walking Dead did at the beginning. First season, 6 episodes. After that, 16.
Right.
And I hope we see longer seasons after this one.
I hope so.
I would like a longer season, but if there's a choice between 10 superb episodes and 10 superb and 10 that are of varying degrees of success, I'd rather have 10 great episodes than 20 mixed.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
I can see that.
Just a couple of notes of stuff that I have to mention. Pike's green wraparound tunic, very leather. I love it. It was very, it's this series version of Kirk's green wraparound tunic.
Right.
It's great. It's perfect.
Yeah.
They stuffed it in, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I like the fact that Spock mentions when he's talking with Chapel about his pet Saylat that he bonded with, as we saw in the animated series episode Yesteryear, which is perhaps one of the best episodes of the animated series.
Yep.
Well,
and live in Enterprise, if you recall.
Yes. Yep. And the Chapel talks about her Malamute who bit a girl who called her stupid. Which was, sort of a neat little bonding moment. I loved it when there's the body switch and Chipper goes, I know how a door works. You need to get up, and the other line, hijinks are the most logical course of action.
Yeah. Great lines.
week, I'm now going to read off the Enterprise Bingo.
All right. And then,
Let's go.
Leo, after we do that, let's sign off for this week, and we'll do the Peel thing next week.
That sounds good.
That'll give me a chance to re-edit a couple things, so that'll be
Sounds
fine.
good.
Okay.
Enterprise Bingo, which also said on the pad, do not get caught. Yeah. Freeze the frame. Use transporter to reflavor gum. We saw that. Phaser stun duel. We saw that. Turbo lift 2-door shout challenge. Set universal translator to Andorian. Gravity boot hang challenge. Medical tricorder challenge. Vulcan marsupial. Food replicator challenge. Durian fruit, which is an earth fruit, fruit which apparently smells terrible, according to all reports. I've never had it, but I've read about it. Probably seen something about it on the old Food Network.
Yeah.
A tribble into the transporter buffer. There you go. Sit in the captain's chair. And the last one, EV suit challenge, unsanctioned spacewalk. And the last one, I'm sorry, I got ahead. That wasn't the last one. Is signed the Scorch.
Right.
It's obviously, in a way, it's not literally a bingo because they didn't set it as a
right.
square. It might be that bingo is just come sort of slang for like a list of things to do.
Challenge.
Like a treasure hunt. Yeah.
Listen, I love the idea that lower. I would love to see on lower decks if there was a Cerritos challenge, and what those are.
Oh yeah.
It's a great. It was ensigns and lower ranked crew members. This version of Star Trek is amazing to me. The best of years, maybe the best ever, says Keith Jacobson. I agree. I agree. I'm loving this show. Call me a fanboy if you will. I'm loving this show. Show. I think they're doing an outstanding job, and just keep doing it. I wish the season was 100 episodes long, but that I realize is untenable. I could watch a new episode of this every week.
I could too. It's very good.
So,
Chris and Leo, may I offer as my final comments? I
would love you to, Joe.
Thank you. I have one Townsel tidbit, and I have a few in a new category, Townsel nitpicks.
Okay.
Townsel tidbit's very minor. I'm sure you can both notice it as well. I just love seeing I should have looked up the name, but I love seeing Spock's Vulcan harp hanging on the wall in his quarters. That was cool. As far as the nitpicks, I'm not sure we know what triples are yet, but again, very, very minor thing if it's even valid.
Right.
As far as the bingo list item. The one thing that I thought was a little bit bigger as far as a nitpick, and maybe I'm just not understanding the technology, but they're using the medical transporter to reflavor the gum. Isn't M'Benga's daughter like in that buffer? I mean, I'd hate to see something happen to her as they're playing around with it.
I'm going to assume that they have a dedicated server for her pattern.
I would think so because they were using the medical transporter anyway.
Yeah.
Like
that's true. They use it for stuff.
That's how Chapel ends up chasing down the guy that's running through the ship.
In the first episode.
They have the daughter on a separate floppy disk then, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. She's on
there's a dedicated server.
She's on the thumb drive.
Yeah.
I still can't get used to holding things. I have the product, by the way, now.
On
Far Ease. There it is.
That's awesome.
It's artisanally made. You can tell each label is artisanally crafted.
It is. It is handcrafted. Yeah, exactly.
Signed and numbered, huh? All right.
Yeah. Why is my daughter gum? Yeah.
That'd be a terrible accident.
Yeah, exactly.
The flavor of what we got back didn't last long, unfortunately.
Right. She may be gum, but she's delicious. All right. Anyway, it's getting to be the witching hour. Anybody have anything else before we sign off here today?
I think I've covered all.
I think I did too, and I will say, as I say in every episode, please follow us on Facebook at Trek Tonight, Twitter at Trek Tonight, subscribe and like us on YouTube, Trek Tonight, and you want to contact us directly with any questions. We're still waiting for some fan mail from a flounder. Please email us at trektonight2022 at gmail.com. If you want to ask us a question, we'll try to answer it.
Definitely. And also you can leave comments on the Facebook page.
Yes, absolutely.
Talk to you directly there. I know I'm on there pretty much almost every day.
Join the 4,000 plus happy viewers.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
By tuning into Trek Tonight.
Joe, anything exciting going on you want to mention before we get out of here? Going on with you?
Briefly, as always, I got joetownsel.com, always visible on your screen there when we get together.
Right.
All my projects right now are still in the coming soon stage.
Okay.
But those include a new book, and several more streaming projects in the works.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Well, Joe, it's always great to see you.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me. It's always a blast.
We were on a program with Joe every week, which was the Starbase 80 supplemental about Picard. So we got to see Joe every week.
Yeah.
He was one of the cast with us, and so now we don't see him quite as often as that show's done. But at any rate, and shout out to our good friends, Floba Boyce and John Weber, without whom we might not be doing this show, because
very true.
I didn't know how to do this until I learned it from John.
And check them out at Starbase 80.
Starbase 80.
Also Commander's Log, where they will go over older episodes. That's on Sundays at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Yep.
Starbase 80 is at 7 p.m. They're the lead-in for.
No, not Starbase 80. Commander's Log is at 7 p.m.
Commanders. I'm always trying. Is Commander's?
Yeah, Commander's Log's on just prior to you guys on Trek Tonight. Right. The original Starbase 80 is
on Sunday.
Classic episodes that John Weber heads.
Yeah, John Weber does on Starbase 80 does the classic episode reviews, right. And with every week he has somebody fascinating on to talk about old episodes. They watch an old episode and then they talk about it from the originals for any of them. Actually, it's not just TOS; it's all of them.
Well, and lately with Strange New World, they've been able to pick an episode that's related to what's been discussed with you folks and with them every Thursday. So
yeah. But that's on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern, and I'm not going to bother to try to do the math. I'm too tired and sick. But anyway,
11 Western.
There you go. Thank you. All right, guys. I am going to pull us out of here. Let's see here. Thanks again, Joe, for joining us. Thanks to Leo. Next week, we will show you the adventure Leo had at the Peel Center for Media.
Yes. I'll be watching.
And what he saw there. Thank you, Joe. We will love to have you. Who's our guest next week, Lynn?
I believe Diana Laura, who was supposed to be here last week.
Oh, good.
Unfortunately, was caught up with
business.
Business. I believe she's our guest next week, but we'll let you know.
And if you look on our Facebook page, Angela ran into her.
Yes, my Angela at Star Wars Celebrations in California, a place I would have liked to visit. We support all science fiction here on
of course.
Starbase 80. Trek Tonight.
Yes.
Inspired too, clearly.
All right, folks, we're going to get out of here. My dinner is waiting for me.
Oh, good.
Have a great week. We'll see you next week. I don't know the name of the episode yet for next week.
No, we don't.
Yeah, IMDb doesn't tell us yet, so we'll have to look for it.
That'll be a mystery.
Yes.
All right, gents.